And I was on an overnight flight from New York, and I apologize if I seem a little groggy or jet lagged.
You actually look really fresh. Your hair looks good.
Thank you, thank you. Nothing helps the hair like an overnight flight.
We are here today talking about your creativity process and what inspires you. What about your childhood has informed who you are and why you wanted to choose filmmaking?
Getting to the point where I could kind of make my first movie was a very gradual thing. I think, I grew up in Wisconsin, kind of a semi-rural area outside of the city, outside of Milwaukee, and I think a big thing for Pig, which was the movie I made, I think was that my dad passed away when I was a kid, and that was a big thing I was grappling with. But I was a kind of quiet kid who liked to stay in his room and doodle and read comic books, and I think that that creates a certain fascination with story and with visual thinking. I mean, I think all those sort of little elements kind of just they accumulate to become your voice and your interests.
And you have a particular love for graphic novels.
I do. I love graphic novels, love comics. I think part of that comes from, I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to read comic books to me before I went to bed. And then I had read comics as a kid, and then I sort of rediscovered them in high school, and then even more into college. I've become really interested in maybe adapting some. Yeah, it's always been a passion of mine.
When I first read my first graphic novel, it was Mouse. When I really got into the beauty of the visual of it, it to me it looked like a storyboard.
Yeah, in some sense, it is like a storyboard. I mean, it's how different shots and moving through different shots within a scene and within the drama of a scene can sort of accentuate that, and what the right way to see a certain interaction is, like whether you're in a close up or a wide shot. So yeah, I think that's definitely informed some of my movie making.
Yeah, and you talking about it just reminded me that you didn't you make a graphic novel?
It's not a professional graphic
We don't
novel, but I
talk
spent
about
a
that.
no, we can talk about that. I spent a lot of time on it, and I was really proud of it. I mean, it's not for sale or anything, but I made this graphic novel that was kind of three short stories exploring various kind of kind of creation myths, more like the myths of falls. It was called Falling, and it was exploring the Prometheus myth and the Enkidu myth and the Adam and Eve myth, because they all sort of have a comparable element of like the fall of man and the like beginning of civilization and some sort of loss of some kind of primal thing, and this kind of comparative mythology graphic novel exploring those three different stories.
That sounds very similar to your first film.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some elements of that in Pig for sure. This kind of the entering of the city, the kind of the purity of being in nature, the burden of society. Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that in there. I shot a short film with some friends my senior year, and that was the first time I got a taste of kind of what directing really is like. It's this kind of larger operation, and I really enjoyed that. So if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I ever would have really considered pursuing film in a more serious way. I mean, I think somewhere deep down, I knew I really wanted to do something in the arts, and I wanted to do film. I just wasn't really sure how to pursue that. And I think that's why it took me through most of my 20s to kind of find some footing there, because I was wandering a bit aimlessly through the dark to try and, find people to work with and figure out how to get into this industry that I didn't really have many connections in. Um, I think probably if I was honest with myself deep down, I knew I wanted to do something in the arts and film specifically. But it just didn't seem practical. So yeah, I probably would have pursued being a lawyer, um, dropped out of that at some point, and still tried to like draw comic books or something like that.
You're an incredible artist. Like
I'm
I
okay.
wish I would
I'm
have
okay with
grabbed
that.
the painting that we did of Milton.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I'm okay. I
You're
don't know if I could ever
incredible.
make it as a pro. I mean, that was a big thing with Pig was I wrote this script and, it could have gone nowhere, but it almost did. I mean, like we sent it out to probably 10 production companies and one bid on it. So, it just managed to touch enough people and touch those people in a really deep way. It was not like the hot script in the town. It was this script that, people would read it and either say, "What is this? I don't get it," or they just like it really spoke to them and they really loved it. So it was about surrounding ourselves with like people that really loved it, and that worked well because we were doing it for very little money, so no one was going to do it for the paycheck, so they were doing it for the love of it.
How do you protect your creative space? Because there is that 8 year gap, or there is that gap between projects where you
Yeah.
can really go stir crazy.
The biggest thing I do to protect that creativity is kind of like forgive myself when I'm not being creative and when I'm not being productive. I think that's the biggest thing is like I've learned that, in writing, most writing days, you're not actually typing that many words. Like there's a lot of staring at the wall and a lot of sitting there and thinking, a lot of having a super creative writing night until 4 in the morning and then feeling burnt out the next day and not getting any writing done. Um, but like just sort of understanding what rhythms I like to write with, knowing that sometimes they change, sometimes it's okay to like burn out hard writing for a day and then not be able to write for another day or two as you kind of are re-stewing and reaccumulating everything. Um, so, knowing that, I mean, especially before I was, kind of like actually seen as a professional writer and director, when I was just some guy in his 20s trying to figure out how to do it. It was always like, oh, my mom would ask, like, well, are you like writing from like 9 to 5? Like, are you treating this like a job? And like, I understand why people perceive it that way, but at the same time, it's kind of not that way. You don't have to be like any other writer. Forgive yourself for what you expect you should be like, and just try and find the rhythm that makes sense for you. And then there's sort of a thing such as writer's block, maybe, but I think writer's block is just part of writing. Like it's just, you need a beat to recharge and to not write and to let ideas swirl before you hit the page again. I could have a great day of writing. Then the next day, I'm just like, oh, I get up late because I was up really late writing. I'm not feeling like I have any idea what I want to write. And then if you get down, if you just accept, like, okay, maybe today I just need to like watch a movie, read a book, go get dinner with a friend, just like like maybe take some notes or something. Like I don't have to be trying to execute on a scene. If you just allow that rather than tell yourself like, ah, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you like so stuck? Like you should be able to figure this out. Like that can really mire you in that mindset even longer. Like sometimes the best thing is just accept it, do something that inspires you, and call it a day.
Where'd you learn that from?
Probably trial and error, I think. Because I spent a
Years
long
of being
time
like,
not.
ah.
I think I spent a long time not doing that, being like, "What's wrong with you, you idiot? Why can't you? You had such a good writing night last night. Why can't you do that again?" Um, so probably, yeah, I think trial and error. I think it was like a fairly recent discovery. I think it was, yeah, it was probably in my like late 20s that I was finally like, okay, I'm sort of getting a sense of what my writing rhythm is, and it involves down days, and that's okay.
Did you have that before Pig? Because before people make it, which you've made it, people would
Mhm.
say, there is so much pressure. And then you go home for the holidays and you're like you're dreading seeing people because you don't have any news. Like I
Yeah,
remember my mom would call me and say, "Did you audition today? Did you go to dance class?" And it's like, "What kind of audition? Did you get it?" And then when I would get something, and say, "Is it a speaking role?" So it's like constantly like having to report when you don't have
yeah.
anything to show.
I think my methods were the same. I just felt worse about them back then. Like I was in that mindset of, that's why I think I discovered this in my late 20s, because that was when I started getting some career traction and being like, hey, I guess this is okay. Like this maybe is just how you work. You can still like you won't be a failure just because you sometimes need a down day.
when I'm stuck, if I can just learn from other people who are creating, maybe I can find something in there that'll help me. And so that's why I wanted to choose you to interview, because we've known each other for almost 3 years. I met you after you filmed Pig, but before it came out. I started writing like a year after I met you, and I started to kind of think about, like, well, what is Michael doing? And I was like, well, Michael's taking a nap.
Mrs. Basson, she recommended, because I remember I was a kind of like a little bit of an OCD, very like hard on myself kid. And if I got in this mindset of like, I don't know what to do with for this project or this essay, like I'm unable to do this, like I could get really like down on myself to the point where I couldn't even begin something. And I remember she recommended to
Wow.
me, when you feel that way, just lie on your back and like stare up at the ceiling and like try not to fall asleep. And I think that's kind of what she was getting at, which I do think those sort of, that state when you're like drifting off or just waking up and like sort of, yeah, you're kind of like your brain is like not quite going into like sleep mode or REM mode, but you're starting to kind of create these kind of odd connections. I think that's a wonderful time to problem solve and to get fun ideas. One trick is keep a notebook there so that, because sometimes you'll like get an idea and be like, oh, that's wonderful, I'm going to take a nap now. When I'm writing a script, I'll usually try and start with something that just undeniably appeals to me. Like there's some element of the story that, if you stripped everything else away, there's something that just sort of I like, with Pig, I always say it's, just this image of this old man in the woods with his pig. With Quiet Place, there are some elements I can't talk about that I'm just like, this,
Come
everything else
on.
aside, like everything else aside, this thing just like speaks to me. And then I think once you find those kernels of things, and they can be moments, they can be character attributes, they can be like scenes, goals, like it can be anything. It's just like finding that thing that is like fundamental and meaningful enough in and of itself that like you don't really like that's enough. But then you want to ask questions about that, and you start from that base of like um not fact, but like almost like emotional fact. It's like, this, I care about this, I don't know why I care about this, but here's a thing I care about. Even if it's a dumb little scene or a whole lot character idea, something about this really appeals to me. Let me start just asking myself questions about this thing. And part of it's like finding the right questions to ask about it. Like, why is a useful one to start? It's like, why is this person this way? Or why are they doing this? Or like building your story out of those questions about the things that resonate with you on a deep emotional level. I find that very useful. I like to write at the edge of my understanding. Like you need some grasp on what you're working on, but you also don't want to have all the answers. Because life is a discovery, and you want your creative stuff to be a discovery as well, and that's fun for you. But also that's going to be fun for the audience, because if they feel like you're preaching to them and you have like a specific agenda that you know you decided on before you ever even started this thing, it's not going to feel organic. They're not going to feel included in that process. That's my sort of theory, at least. So I like sort of writing on the edge of my understanding, making it very question based, and sort of bringing the audience into that questioning, and making that an organic part of it, and where the story kind of evolves from. And yeah, I like to think that that engages the audiences, and it also just makes it more fun and interesting for me.
Yeah, like you said in the Austin Film Festival, which they have this
Good grief.
amazing graphic of you, by the way. It's so cute. I'm like, oh, that's him. His hair's a little darker, but
Yeah, yeah,
um,
they really went for the my
that was a
beard's a lot
cool,
thinner.
yeah, your cartoon version of yourself.
Yeah,
You say, people say write about what you know, but write about what you want to know more about. And then the whole process is just like this fun discovery and research.
yeah,
Stephen King says in his he writes in his book on writing that you should write with the door closed and edit with the door open in terms of
yeah.
sharing your work. But I've seen you share your work as it's in progress.
But that's a good writing book, by the way. That's
Mhm.
that's one I've read as well. They're part of the questioning discovery process for me. Like I don't know the story yet when I'm writing the first draft. I know some of the things I
Mm.
want to hit. I know some of the things that interest me, but I sort of use the first draft to like guide me and let me know what I'm actually interested in. Like I write it there's a lot of stuff that's going to go, but in reading it, I can be like, oh, this is the story. Like sometimes I'll find a whole thing of being like, oh, this tiny thing that I mentioned in like 2 lines, like clearly that like wants to be a bigger part of this. Like that fascinates me and that excites me. So like write the stuff that interests me. Don't think about it too much. Don't judge it too much as I'm writing that first draft. And then really hone and outline more in the revision process. And so yeah, in that at that phase, I like to send it to friends, and I think it's better not to be precious about that stuff. Like you can spend your whole life
Don't be
not writing that
precious.
script you've been like meaning to write because you're afraid what people will think of it.
Is it rational? Is it logical that anybody should be expected to be afraid of the work that they feel they were put on this earth to do?
I never expect my first draft to be some stroke of genius. Like I hope it has like a few elements in it that I find exciting still, even when I'm done with it. And then I use those as my kind of North Star to guide me towards what I want to focus on. But, you know, I mean, I'm sure some people can write a script first draft. It's just a masterpiece, but like,
They
no,
call
I
it
can't,
shitty
I can't
first
do that.
drafts for a reason, which is why I
Yeah.
loved stealing this other book of yours.
Is this sponsored by
But
this?
yeah. But I did buy you another copy. But this was good. This was really good book about writing.
That was recommended to me by the editor for Pig, Brett Bachman.
How many
Yeah,
drafts of Pig were there?
like I would say sort of somewhere probably between 3 and 9. I think it was a reasonably quick process. I think I wrote it in about 9 months, and then we took it out to
84 pages, right?
yeah, it was a short one.
But it was 90-minute film.
Yeah, and it could have been a little longer, but yeah, I think I write not usually the rule is like a page a minute. I think my pages are a little longer than a minute usually.
That's how
Um,
quickly you write them?
no, 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 no. When I feel like I have enough ideas for it that it's like I gotta crank through. I got like there's 5 more pages of this scene, and I like no, like it's got to come out now. Like I know the vibe I'm going for. It's gonna hurt it to wait and sleep on it. Like that's probably in the writing phase what that sort of flow feels like to me. In the directing phase, I think it's a different kind of flow for me. Like you're especially when you're on set, you're in such a constant state of like problem solving. Like it's just you know not in a negative way. It's just like there's a problem every minute that you are solving, having to choose between this thing, like this fabric or this fabric, or this angle or this angle, or like, are we going to do this or are we going to drop this? And like, there's so many things that you're constantly having to figure out, and you're always trying to weigh, like, what of these are essential, what of these are malleable, and there is a flow to that I think helps with like that opening scene of Pig, where you just have to get so focused on like what's actually important here, that like you can sort of you're always having to think about all the little details, but you also can like really be focused in on like what is essential. So there is a certain flow to like decision making. Like you can suddenly make decisions that probably in the writing process would have taken me a month on set. It's just like, yeah, we're gonna do that.
You can work in so many distractions. You can be interrupted when you're writing, but I get like I get really angry when I'm interrupted. I can't. I'm too busy.
Not right now. I'd love to. I'm too busy right now.
So how do you learn that? Like, how do you learn to just like flip your focus so quickly?
If I go watch a YouTube video, I'll suddenly won't write for another 3 hours or something. But for me, at least, there is no like perfect creative state where like I'm never gonna like, if I only wrote when I felt 100% ready to write, I never would write. So it's like part of it's just like knowing that like at a certain point I can just flip the switch, and like if I force myself to sit down and start typing, like I can start doing something. So it's like people talk about how they're working on a script but they'll never write it, and it's because eventually you just have to, it's never going to feel like exactly the right time to write it. So just sit down and start writing it. And maybe it isn't the right time, and you'll get a few words in and be like, yeah, this, I just can't do this right now. Or maybe you'll start doing it and it'll be sort of like an engine cranking up, and it'll just be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm okay, I'm digging that, I'm digging that.
Biggest excuse is like, I don't have time. But what Anne Lamott talks about is she's got this, 1 inch by 1 inch frame on her desk that's empty. And she said, if I can write enough to fill that frame, that's her goal every day.
There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything. Time enough for everything. There's time.
And it gets you started. Even
Yeah.
if you have 10 minutes or 20 minutes, that's enough time. But we don't think it is because we have a feature film in our head that's going to take 9 months. But if we don't take 10 minutes every day, it's never going to get written. So what do you say to people that are like, I don't have time, I have 3 jobs, I have kids, I'm 80 years old? Like, what's this like time thing, this illusion that we can't do it because we don't have time?
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. It's like, it does take a lot of time to write a script, but it doesn't take a lot of time to start writing a script. Like you can start, and if it means enough to you, and if you get enough joy out of it, you'll find time to do it. You'll stay up an hour later than you normally would. You'll get up an hour earlier. Like, people are super busy, but a lot of times, like, we're exhausted by our lives, and then we have days where we're just exhausted, and so we just don't get anything done because it's just like, wow, I'm just depleted. But like, if you find a thing that it makes you excited, and you find you have a passion for it, on those days when otherwise, you might have a down afternoon because you just need to catch up on sleep or whatever, work on your script. Like, try to find, everyone has like a half hour somewhere where they can sit down and make stuff happen, even if it's when they're waiting at the DMV or something. So you'll never know if you're going to get into it unless you actually start filling out that little square inch. Like, you can definitely find enough time to start. It's sort of like everything and nothing is enough. Like, if no one saw Pig and I just got the experience of making it, that would have been enough in its own way. Like there's so many joys along the way of, I mean, it's the same thing of working with crews. Like, I love that Pig did well, and people saw it, and it was exciting to share with people. But I also just loved the experience of like working with all these talented people and scouting for locations and meeting all the Portland people. And like when I think back to Pig, a lot of what I think of it's the work. It's long days in the edit with the editors, and like brainstorming with the cinematographer, and hanging out with the crafty people, and like and those are some of the things that carry on with me. Knowing that I can sort of like something came out of that and I can share it with people is kind of an icing on the cake, and I'm so happy that people responded to it.
Do you like the way I touch you?
It's kind of left me now. Like, now it's a part of the world and people can enjoy it. My experience with it was a very also just a very intimate, personal time in my life. And most of the joy isn't going to come from the actual product being completed. It's going to come from the process and all of the growth that you go through in making it and all that. So the product is a useful goal in order to get to do all those other steps, and to sort of, have it amount to like something that you can wrap your head around and aim towards. But the actual, the journey is kind of where most of your joy is going to come from. Like, if you love the idea of selling a book, but you don't love the idea of writing a book, then don't write a book.
As with everything creatively we do, if we don't enjoy the journey, then pick a different path.
Yeah.
Because it's a long journey, baby.
It's a long journey. Yeah.
Because it's a long journey, baby.
It's a long journey, all the way to London, where it's
all the
now
way to
night
London.
here.
And I'm so happy I got to talk to you. I couldn't
Me
sleep
too.
last night. That's how excited I was to talk to you. I was like,
I couldn't sleep last night because I was on a turbulent plane. But
there's so much here that I want to continue on, but I'm sure that the conversation will keep going.
There's more time.
There's more time. There's always time.
There's more time.
There's more time. There's always time.
There's time enough for everything. 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 Time. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything.
time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything. There's time enough for everything.
How was my acting? Did I get the part?